to the Isles of Scilly. It's November, it's actually quite cold. I've just got here after a bit of a delay. As usual in the winter there's often some hold-ups trying to get to the islands. It was foggy. First of all foggy in Penzance, and then the fog moved over to the islands. It has to be clear both sides. I'm following a little group of oyster catchers up the beach. The light's going already, so it's time to hole up. First things first, let's get the fire going. This whole week's worth of adventures starts with this box of books. These are all books about shipwrecks, or most of them are. They're all vintage books. This one has a map in it, which I really like, which is dated by hand. It says Islands Visited, June 1947. This one's called The Fortunate Islands, The Story of the Isles of Scilly, and it's dated June 1947. Perhaps these all belong to the same person because they're all dated. It's quite a similar time. I want to read a bunch of these books, or as much as I can tonight before daylight tomorrow, so I can get started. And let's catch up again tomorrow. It is a really foggy day, what we might call a pea super. So I'm sitting here in my little cottage where I've been doing a week of art residency. In fact, one of my paintings is behind me on the wall. I'll show you, there you go. Actually, that's quite a stormy piece, isn't it? Foghorn is signalling every minute with 4 blasts from the lighthouse on Round Island. Well, it's been a night of reading, a night of studying maps, and a night of trying to find a thread through all this information that we could follow to find out more about the story of a shipwreck. So what we're going to do is we're going to focus our attention on one wreck that happened here on Tresco, or just north of Tresco, and that is this one, the wreck of the Sophie. This is a wooden vessel. It was wrecked in 1896, and it was wrecked north of Briar on a place called Shipman Head. Well, I can see that on the map here. Here's Tresco where I'm staying, here's Briar, and this at the north of it is Shipman Head, so that's where the wreck found itself in trouble. It was then towed by a steamer called the Lady of the Isles. So I found a picture of the Lady of the Isles. There it is there. And this vessel was put into service in 1875, about 20 years before this wreck happened. Her job was to take passengers from Penzance to the islands. On that day, she was sent to Shipman Head to assist with the wreck of the Sophie. So the Lady of the Isles ended up towing the Sophie into New Grimsby Channel. Where she was left to rest, I don't know exactly, but I'm hoping that we'll be able to find that out this week by studying some of these photographs and going on a bit of an adventure. The fog is clearing. It's time to go. I'm going to be travelling by bike. Don't want a wet bum. Past 1,000 times on my bike, but look where it's from. To give you an idea of scale, I can't reach the top of it. That must have been quite hefty to bring ashore. The open ocean, the Atlantic. Got to do the rest on foot because we're walking around the perimeter of the island. I can hear the waves just lapping here. And I'm walking fast because I'm expecting a visit from Nicola White, mudlark, in a minute. Her boat will come in about an hour and a bit, so I've got to pace it. What do we know then about the Sophie? Well, it was a boat that was built in Finland, in Helsinki, but was registered in Norway. The boat itself was a wooden vessel which measured about 135 feet long. And it was carrying anthracite, which is a type of coal that really powered the Industrial Revolution. Its cargo was being carried from Cardiff back to Norway. So it was en route when it struck trouble. That happened at a place called Shipman Head. One of the things that's so interesting about the Isles of Scilly, and the reason why so many shipwrecks happened here, apparently it's one of the most frequented shipping routes, and certainly would have been first landfall for anyone coming from the Americas, 3,000 miles away, from Europe, from everywhere really around the world. So that is one reason why there are so many shipwrecks here on Scilly. But another reason why is because out there in the open ocean are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of very shallowly submerged rocks and ledges, just deep enough to be hidden, but not deep enough to be able to sail over. And they are just an absolute death trap for boats. The seabed here is littered with objects from shipwrecks and stories of shipwrecks too. Let's go and see if we can find where Shipman's Head is and see if we can imagine where the Sophie foundered. I can hear the fog siren again. Oh, I hope Nicola's going to get in okay. I hope her helicopter is not going to be cancelled. Look, fog's coming right back in again. Okay, get ready to enter a castle. This is called Cromwell's Castle, and it's a stone gun tower built by parliamentary forces during the Civil War after they captured the islands from the Royalists in 1651. Just as a reminder, no metal detecting allowed here, but you can imagine there must be a few 17th century hammers lying around here. Here we go then. Built of granite. Look, it's still got the original fixings for the gate, the door. Right, let's go inside. It's like a kind of turret and spiral steps. We are on the gun platform. Oh, that's pretty good positioning, isn't it? Right, let's have a look and see what we're looking at here. We're on the ground floor. Aha, I was going to say, I thought that was the loo, and it is. So we're on the gun platform. We've just come up the outside steps, and we're on the gun platform, and I've just spotted the latrine behind me here. This is what you might call a loo with a view, never off duty. So I guess you must have done your poo and then put it out here so it can wash down into the water. Reenactment. Just need a bucket. The window's slightly high. If I was designing this, I'd put it probably about a foot lower. But otherwise, they're not bad facilities. It looks a bit dark. I'm not sure I like the look. Should we go in? Very, very dark. Kind of hole. Another one on this side. Maybe for ammunition. What do we think? Oh, guys, we're inside now. Wow. It's got a domed roof and pillars. Over the years I can see that some calcification has happened with the drips of the water. Wow. Look, there's some graffiti on the wall up there. 1733. TP and IM made their mark here. They just remind you that real individuals like us worked in places like this, day in, day out, in the weather and the wind. It must have been pretty harsh, mustn't it? You can hear the sea below. And I guess what we're doing now is heading right up to the highest viewing point. Again, another doorway with the original fixings. So this is an open gun floor, protected by a high parapet wall, which also served as a lookout. Every single aperture gives a different view. Wow, this one's good. That's back up the channel towards St Mary's. It says here that the gun floor is a poor design because the 6 guns have narrow views, leaving blind spots between. Only one of these points landward, from which direction an enemy attack could be made without serious opposition. A small stair leads up to a lookout position on the top of the parapet. Right, let's head up there. It's amazing how many mistakes were made here on Scilly, because the castle up the hill was also a mistake. It was built in the wrong place and they had to take it down. That's that one up there. Whoa! Well, that's where we just walked, all the way around that bit of coast. And out to sea. Now, this is what we were looking for, Shipman Head. So that behind me is Shipman Head. That is where the Sophie foundered and began to get into trouble, and the men aboard felt very much that the boat was breaking up. They could see pieces of timber falling away from the boat. And so in 1896, when this boat got into trouble, vessels from Tresco and Briar went to assist the men. But when they arrived there, they found there was no one aboard. The whole place was empty, and in a ghostly way the ship was laid for supper. The only living creature on the boat was a dog that was rather well fed. Everything was as it should be. The plates were on the table. No one could understand it, and they couldn't see any men anywhere. They towed the Sophie up the channel here and left her in between the islands of Tresco and Briar. I want to see a picture of this boat now, and I want to see if we can identify where it was left. So here is the image of the Sophie as it was in 1896, somewhere on the low tide sand between these 2 islands. And when the tide goes out very low, which happens about every month, then you can actually walk between the islands. So I think it's been left somewhere between the 2. So what we need to do is look at the landform, see if we can match up the landforms on this image. I can see a building in this image actually. Does anyone else get a book and go try and do this? Scroll in. It just goes to show how much we're relying on digital. Is that a building there in the corner? I think it is. And if it is, then we should be able to see it on that side, I think. It could be, that could be the Tresco side. I see it, I know it, I know it. I know exactly what we're looking at here. Those buildings there are on Tresco. That is New Grimsby, where I just rode my bike. And what we're looking at here is this channel. So it's been right, golly, it's right in the, I think it's the other side of Plum Island. Okay, I know where it is. I know exactly where it is. Let's go and have a look. Nicola has arrived. see if I can find out where that ship came to rest, and I've got a helper with me. Hello! Nicola White's here. She's arrived on the islands, and we're doing loads of shipwreck research this week. So Nicola's got a project, and I've got a project. We're going to see what we can find out today.
Yeah, we're all projected up.
I'm going to walk along in the low tide and see if I can find out where this boat came to rest. I'm looking at these little buildings. I can see 3 or 4 cottages and then a building with a triangular roof and a couple, I think, set further back. We're lucky because we've arrived at this particular side of the island at low tide, so I do think I'm going to be able to go and stand pretty much exactly where that boat finally came to rest in this New Grimsby Channel. So I'm heading out there. I think that must be where it got dragged and left and finally was bought by the owner of this island, who decided that it would be useful to take the timber from it and use it in building work here, and to take its cargo of anthracite and use it to power his greenhouses in the Tresco Abbey Gardens, where a very important collection of exotic plants was developing, which is now the most stunning mature garden. The tides here seem to be very, very low. I think we're nearly there. I think this has got to be it, because I'm looking back, I can see those cottages. How far do you think we could go? I've got to keep going until it starts sinking. I think this must be around about it, to be honest. I think we're here. I think we're standing where the Sophie lay in 1896. So I'm just reading from some information from the Royal Maritime Museum in Greenwich that when this vessel, the Sophie, was first seen and then boarded by a Scilly's gig crew, it appeared to be a Marie Celeste type mystery. All was in order, table laid, warm food on the stove, and the clock still wound, but a well-fed dog was the only life aboard. 2 gigs, the St Mary's lifeboat and the Scilly packet, Lady of the Isles, brought her 2.5 miles to anchor off New Grimsby. 5 days later the puzzle was solved when her crew arrived at Gibraltar on the British steamer Glenmore. Apparently, although she had been replanked, the boat itself was only 29 years old, and so when the boat began to break up, it was in fact just the outside planking that was coming away, and the crew thought that it was actually properly breaking up, so they completely abandoned the ship. I'm going to look around and see if I can find anything from the Sophie still here. When I find a piece of wood like this, which is now almost spongy, it's so soft and old, and it's got weed growing on it, I do wonder. Nicola was just wondering what happened to the dog. It's a really good question, but I would imagine the dog would have been brought ashore, taken onto Tresco or Briar, probably got given a name that was relevant to the fact that it had eaten the entire ship's supper by the time it had been found. Perhaps it got called Gannet. Well, these are the 2 sideboards from the billet head of the Sophie. They're painted black with a foliate design, which means leaves, based on leaves, and gold. Beautiful, aren't they? Imagine how impressive seeing that. going through the water at speed. Amazing. And here's an image of it from the other direction. And it says here that it's disintegrating on the beach at Tresco in 1897. So a year later, that's what it looked like. That's what the sea does to timber. I've just left the gardens and I'm just peeping over the gate, and I can see in the background there the old Victorian greenhouses. So those must have been the greenhouses that were heated by the anthracite that came off the wreck of the Sophie to keep the tiny little saplings and seedlings warm and sheltered. There's a really good picture on the front of this book, and it shows the pilot gigs, the gig boats, local people, local islanders helping those who are still aboard a ship which has obviously struck the rocks. I've been given special permission by one of the ladies' gig crew to have a look in this shed at the traditional pilot gig, which is rowed by hand and has been for hundreds of years. It's thought that this dates back to around the 1870s. Let's open the gate and have a look. Oh, they're fantastic, aren't they? Wow, this is the one I've come to see. It's a traditional boat. Gosh, look how long it is. I mean, it must be 25 feet long. It's made of wood. This one's called the Tsar. So these boats are called pilot gigs because they were used to pilot ships into harbour. But they were also used when there were wrecks. People all around Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly would jump into these boats and go out into the open ocean, and they would risk their own lives to help save people who were in peril in the sea. So this boat is absolutely loaded with history, and one of these was used to go and assist in the wreck of the Sophie.
So this is a nail that I picked up on Farm Beach and just happened to show it to someone as I walked off the beach, and he told me that was where part of the Sophie wreck was brought in.
That is amazing, because do you know where I was today? On Farm Beach with a picture of the Sophie wreck.
Oh my god.
And I was trying to find out where it must have been left, because I could see in the background your house in the photos.
Yeah.
And it was right in between the channel.
Oh my god, so it's true. Wow.
It's true. Is this seriously?
Well, I mean, he just said, you know what, that could be a nail from the Sophie.
So you must have found this, basically, Farm Beach, just in front of the cottages?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's got to be, hasn't it? It's got to be.
It's definitely an old 19th century now.
Well, so what do you know about this, Nicola?
Well, you can tell the square-headed nail is already indicates that it's pretty old. And, you know, I find a lot of nails on the River Thames from the shipbuilding era, 19th century shipbuilding times, and that looks very much like them.
That must be them. Did look really carefully to see if I could find anything, but I could not have dreamed that you would bring something.
Isn't that incredible? Of all the ships that you could have mentioned.
I can't believe it. Well, as this expedition comes to a close, I can't help but think I could not have been sat at the pub with two more knowledgeable people yesterday evening. My friend Emma, who's an islander, has lived here for years, and she's a beachcomber, and she also rows on the pilot gig team. I asked her to come to the pub and meet us, and she brought with her a little bag of shipwreck finds, including a load of beautiful beads and also this incredible nail, which she then just out of the blue said, I believe it could have come from a wreck called the Sophie, and she had no idea that I was looking into the Sophie this week. So to hold this little piece of shipwreck history in my hand is quite amazing. To have been here also with Nicola White, who knows so much about this type of object. She finds ship's nails all the time on the Thames, and she was able to say very definitely that this is a ship's nail that looks like it's from the 19th century, so that ties in perfectly with the date of the wreck of the Sophie. And I just think what a wonderful way to end this story. It's really interesting that this nail is twisted and contorted the same as the hull of the Sophie was as it lay there on New Grimsby Sound. Emma told me that when she found this, it was coated in green, which told her that it was made of a copper alloy, and that's why she stopped and picked it up. So I'm so thrilled that she brought it with her last night, because it really couldn't have been a better end to an amazing week. And there's going to be more expeditions. Nicola White and I have had the best time. Double trouble, as someone said in my feed. We have really had a great laugh, and it's been really fun to go searching with someone who vibes off it as much as me. It really has struck us this week just how connected everything is here on the islands. The sea runs like a thread through every single story here, and every family and every community. You can see it on the gravestones, people lost at sea. You can see it in the church windows with boats going out to help wrecks. It's been a really humbling week and hugely interesting, and I can't wait to come back and discover more about these wonderful islands.